This is the first video where we're going to start to implement our method that will allow us to add inquiries using our home screen. As you know, the process is going to launch from the plus button, which at the moment does nothing. It just recognizes it's a button and you can see its little shape that changes. But what we're going to do is we're going to use code. We're going to use code to add and to remove inquiries from our list. Currently, we're showing this dummy data that we entered as hard-coded literal data. And what we're going to do is start to add our own inquiries now so that we get our customization that's required by the assignment. So that's what we're going to do, and it's going to use what we call an alert controller. So that's how we're going to use a kind of a form, and we'd better implement that as soon as we can. So we need to go to our app-root.tsx file. And this is a good place to add any controllers that we're going to use because they can then be referred to throughout the application. And it's really easy. Ion dash and that's it, added. Now we can then make a reference to this controller when we need it in other modules of the application, and it's there ready for us to use. So what we'll do now is we'll go back to our home page, and what we're going to do is we're going to add a function that allows us to use that alert controller. So just before the render part of this one in the home.tsx page, we're going to put an asynchronous function because this is going to need to work with the awaits and so forth because it's not all going to happen simultaneously or instantly. So this is just present alert, and it's a method. So we do that, and then we create some curly braces where we're going to put our code inside. So we need to add a reference to that controller, and it'll be a const, and we're going to call it alert control, CTRL, which is the normal kind of sort of convention. And then we're going to use normal JavaScript to find it in our template. So document dot query selector, and then we say which one we want to find. And that's our going to get this reference from our app root, and so we can now use it. Oh, so alert. No, that's alert. Alert would be much better. So that's pretty straightforward, and we've now got a reference to our controller. That's just complaining because we're not using it yet. So now we can start to create our own alert controller, which I think once again should be a const because we're never going to actually move it. And we're going to call this one alert. And it's going to be an await that we need here because we have to wait for the alert controller to create the controller before we can actually use. So await. And that's going to be nice. So alert control dot create. And now inside our controller, we'll put an object which will initialize our controller with all of the things that are needed for it to work. Just so that you understand, if you wanted to know more about the alert controller rather than the things that we're just going to use, you can find it in the docs page. And if you do that, alert, you can see the properties are here, and these are the things that can be used, and there's lots of them. So we're going to use a header, some inputs, and we're going to put a message in there as well. We're going to put some buttons, all sorts of things that we can use, but there are many more. It's a very powerful component. So inside our alert controller, what we'll do is we'll have a header. So that's just very simple. And then it's text. So this will be new inquiry for capital inquiry. And then what we're effectively doing is we're creating an array of things. So separated by a comma. And then we can put our message. Once again, a string. Inquiry details. And that'll be effectively like a like a message toolbar header sort of thing. So it's a generalized message to tell the user what to do. So once again, we're creating an array, and then we start with another comma to get the elements of the array separated. So now what we want to add is an array inside this group of controls that we're using. And this is going to be the inputs. And that's what we're going to call this array of controls. Brackets, square brackets, as you know, we're calling them brackets. And we'll put all of our controls in here. Now we want a control so that the people can add the elements of our particular interface. So let's just see what it is. We'll just go back here and we'll go to our interface. And our inquiry has a customer, a phone, and a product. So our fields should match those, because we want to be able to transfer the data from this interface by just referring to data into the processes that we need to do in order to manipulate it. So our controls are going to be a set of objects, so curly braces, so we go name, and this is what will allow it to be referred to by the code so that it knows what we're talking about. So this is where we have to make sure that we match up with customer, phone and product so that the data can be picked up and used in the right fields. Customer, so that's good. And then it's worth probably best putting some placeholder text here to give the user an indication of what we're trying to get them to do. So once again, a string. And that's our first object. So that's the first control that we have on our form, our alert control form. So now to separate our controls, I'll do another comma so that we can separate the objects. So we're doing this again because that indicates an object. And the name of this is going to be phone, type, text. And once again, you would put a placeholder. And that's our second object. And the last one we've got to do, obviously, is for the product. So we're going to do another object. So I'm making this of type text. Now, here's a thing. In the assignment, it says that the user should be able to select a product. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to say we're not going to do that. In fact, what we're going to do is we're just going to use this alert controller, because you can't put a select control into an alert controller. And in order to keep things as simple, because your workload is so high, we're just going to do this, and I'm going to say that our placeholder is the select. And that's a bit of a cheat, but it's going to make it so much easier to make this work rather than trying to implement a brand new form. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add some buttons. Now I've got these on the clipboard to save you sitting watching me type, which is horrible, I know. So I've got my buttons array. Now we've got two buttons. The first one is a cancel button, and so the text that will appear on this button will be cancel. The role of this button is to cancel, and that's all Ionic needs to know what to do with it. It effectively turns it off and does no actions. So we're just going to record that it is pressed though in the log of the console, just to make sure we can make that the button is being acknowledged at the moment. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to make it secondary in CSS so that it's kind of slightly fainter than the other button, and it just gives the other button more focus, more stress. So the next button, separated by a comma of course, the next object button is a text add, text handler. Now the handler is what makes this button, it's like a click event in the forms that you've used in the past. So this hasn't been implemented yet, but we will implement that in the next video. But this is how this button will work. So 2 buttons, handler in this one is just going to be a log, that's all. And in this one, we're actually going to create an inquiry that we can then store. So in the next video, we'll go on to this, and then we'll implement the rest of it.